I watched 30 films for 30 days of June. I watched 30. God. Last month, I tasked myself to watch 30 films for the 30 days of June. I decided to pick these films from the Letterboxd 1 million watch list, some films that I was personally interested in, and also a few films in my collection as well that I really wanted to watch but I just haven't got to. I also gave myself the rule that I would pick films that are 10 years older or more, because I feel like that's the right amount of time to consider a film like a classic. Let's just get started with the first film. Yeah. Nightcrawler is about a pretty weird guy who dedicates his life to the job of recording aftermaths of crimes. This is definitely a way to kick off the month, with a crazy, unhinged and probably autistic character played by Jake Gyllenhaal committing everything to the game of recording aftermaths of crimes to sell to news stations. There's some really painful scenes in here, especially during the first half, where the main character is lonely and just constantly being beat down by everyone and he can't get a job, but it's so interesting seeing him witnessing these people recording this aftermath and him suddenly becoming entranced by it and being determined to get to the top in that career. And he's willing to throw people under the bus, kind of quite literally, to get where he wants to get. Gyllenhaal's performance in here is so good, and I like how it's really what you see is what you get with his character, where he's not really putting on a character trying to act normal around some people. He's just a very crazy guy. The final act of this film is just something else as well. I don't think I've ever felt that tense watching the third act since Uncut Gems. Being John Malkovich is about a guy who finds a tunnel in his office that leads to John Malkovich's mind. This one is by the same writer as one of my favourite films, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Charlie Kaufman, and the story for this one is way weirder, but I do kind of like how weird it is. I feel like the first act of this film takes a while to get going. I know it's establishing all the relationships in the story and everything that leads to finding the door to John Malkovich's head, but everyone is kind of unlikable and basically every one of them is really off, from the way they speak to the way they react to things, and it was a little frustrating, but once the going into John Malkovich's head thing took place, then I feel like all these weird characters start to feel more and more at home. The writing is just so good, and the concept of going inside John Malkovich's head is really just the tip of the iceberg. Superbad is about a trio of teenagers who just want to drink alcohol and get laid. This is one of those classic comedies that I've just missed out on. I watched the unrated cut, which adds like 6 minutes of extra gags, and I really enjoyed this. Everything about this film just harkens back to the late 2000s. The clothes, the look of the film, it's just so 2007, and you got some great chemistry between these actors: Jonah Hill, Michael Cera, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, who all have their moments to shine in here. It's just so fun seeing them trying to get alcohol and get laid, which they really overcomplicate. A highlight of this film for me is the relationship between Fogel and the cops, played by Bill Hader and Seth Rogen, who actually feel like cops plucked straight out of South Park. They're just so over the top and stupid, but they're also kind of likeable because they're played by Bill Hader and Seth Rogen. Yeah, it's just one of the best comedies of the century, probably. Catch Me If You Can is based on a true story about a guy who committed a whole lot of fraud. This is the first of a few Spielberg films that I watched last month, and it is an extremely enjoyable film. Letterboxd lists this under drama and crime, and although the main character is constantly breaking the law, it feels surprisingly light and just very fun as this guy talks his way into being anything and creating all these fake checks in the background. Leo is just great in here as well. This story takes place over numerous years, and I'm pretty sure he was in his late 20s when this was filmed, but he pulls off being a teenager really well. I guess he just has that face. You've got Tom Hanks as the detective as well, and he just has a very well-rounded personality, as he seems very stern at the start, but he starts to enjoy himself more and more as he investigates and looks for this guy. It's a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, and I like it for that.
Good Will Hunting.
Good Will Hunting is about a stubborn janitor who has the very special gift of math. This is a movie that I felt like I should have been more into, but I just couldn't fully connect with the story going on, or the character of Will for that matter. I get that it's supposed to be annoying throughout this film for the character arc that he eventually goes on, but I just found his character just a little too unlikable in some moments. Robin Williams is obviously the biggest standout of this film for me. He won an Oscar for this performance, and I think he really deserved it, as it is probably my favourite performance of his. He just has this very warm energy around him, but you can tell in his eyes that he's hiding something that eventually gets revealed later in the film. I like the cinematography of this thing as well. It has this very gritty feeling to it, especially when Will and his friends are out and about, and it kind of feels like you're there with them at some points with how the camera moves. I think it's a very well made film, great performances, but I just wanted to get into the story a little bit more.
The Breakfast Club.
The Breakfast Club is about this group of kids who get in detention and antics ensue. This film is so insanely 80s, and I do kind of like how 80s it is in a lot of moments. However, a lot of the 80s cheese in this film starts seeping in to the more emotionally heavy parts of the film, and it kind of makes them less impactful in my opinion. Aside from that, I think it's a really great character study on these children who get in detention, and I like how it explores their upbringing and why they are the way they are. Every personality in this group is extremely different from another personality, and that contrast between the lot of them makes the movie so much more entertaining. Also, I can't stop talking about this film without mentioning the synth heavy soundtrack, which makes everything even more 80s. And Don't You Forget About Me is a great 80s song, and they incorporate it in here really well.
10 Things I Hate About You.
10 Things I Hate About You is about two sisters that a lot of people want to date. To be honest, I don't know if that's a great description of the film. It's about a lot of things. It focuses on a lot of characters, so I don't know, it's hard to explain. I wanted to like this one a little bit more, I'm not gonna lie. I found this to be a really weird one. It walks the line between a fully serious romance and an absurdist comedy, and I don't know if it works a lot of the time. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of absurd moments in here that just caught me so off guard, and I was laughing out loud. But then straight after I have to sit through like these two sisters crying, or someone breaking up with someone else, and it's hard to get back into that headspace in my opinion. It feels a little bit like Whiplash, not the film by the way, the feeling. I do like the hyperlink approach to this whole thing, and I think they managed to balance out everyone's characters as best as they could. And I also like how Heath Ledger is at first more of a side character, talked about as this criminal with all these rumours circulating around him, and then as the film progresses it focuses more and more on him, and he's just not like that at all. Mean Girls is about a new girl who accidentally gets into the wrong friend group. This one got a remake last year, which was based on the Mean Girls musical, I think, and everyone hated that. But this is another really well done comedy, which, like Superbad, feels very 2000s. This reminds me a lot of the film Bottoms, and I think that film took a lot of inspiration from this. It's just a very fun watch as you see this main character, played by Lindsay Lohan, traverse through school life and end up getting into this friend group who are not very nice, to say the least. I really love the over-exaggeration of American schools in this film. Actually, I don't know if it's an over-exaggeration. I've never been to American school. Everyone's just very over the top, and some of my favourite moments in here are moments involving the teachers, who just don't entirely act like teachers in it. It's very of its time, and I like it for that. 500 Days of Summer shows a unchronological recap of this main character over 500 days. This is a very great romance, which isn't really a romance, which the narrator literally tells you straight up in the first 5 minutes. The style to this film is great, and you really step into the shoes of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character's scenes with how they're done. There's a scene where him and the Chloe Deschanel girl start dating, and there's this like big choreographed dance to You Make My Dreams, and it's just so fun to watch and just really expresses this guy's emotions in a really creative way. You also know where the story is going due to the non-chronological nature of the film, which makes a lot of scenes between these two characters really bittersweet, as you know this guy's going to get his heart broken. And I like how it doesn't go in the natural direction of romance and they don't get back together again or whatever, but they still talk to each other way after the breakup, and it ends on a pretty uplifting note actually, which I wasn't expecting.
Tim Burton's Corpse Bride.
Corpse Bride is about Johnny Depp's character being swept into an afterlife where he's forced to marry this corpse bride. This is a Tim Burton film that I just never got round to. I remember going to watch it a few months back and people started singing and I wasn't in the mood for a musical, so I just turned it off. But I stuck around for the whole thing this time and I found it to be a really good time. I've said this so many times, but I'm such a sucker for stop motion animation and it looks great in this film. There's a musical number in here with the skeletons and it's beautiful to look at. I also like how Tim Burton takes elements of his afterlife in Beetlejuice and transfers it to this film's afterlife. There's a lot of similarities and just really creative character designs, which Burton is really known for. I'm not gonna lie, I found the main character a bit too compliant, and spoilers, but he's willing to kill himself at the end of this film instead of marrying basically the woman of his dreams, just because a dead woman basically blackmailed him into marrying her. So apart from that, I do really like the love triangle aspect though, and it's only an hour and 15 minutes, so it's a very worthwhile watch. E.T. the Extra Terrestrial is about a child who befriends an alien. This is one of those massive Spielberg films that I just never watched in my childhood, and overall it's a really good time. Obviously the practical effects are what stand out the most for E.T., and the way he moves and talks is just so great. I was actually surprised by how good the cinematography was in here as well. There's some just amazing shots that just look beautiful. It also gets pretty dark for what is a family film. Spoilers again, but E.T. dies in here and you've got this whole family crying over his dead body in a body bag. Of course, he ends up resurrecting himself, but they do go to some dark places, which a lot of Spielberg films actually do, thinking about it. Like, just look no further than the heart scene from Temple of Doom. Yeah, it's just great and it's very ingrained in pop culture, so there were so many shots and lines I recognised. Juno is about a teenager who gets pregnant as the result of having sex with Michael's Sarah. I'm not gonna lie, Juno as a character really got on my nerves in the first half of this film, but as it went on, I realised she was this way so her character could mature as the film went on, and she takes on the responsibility of being pregnant, which I think worked pretty well overall. On the other side of things, you got Jason Bateman's character, who seems like a pretty cool guy at first, but they quickly turn his character into a creep who starts to befriend Juno. He starts hanging out with her. I know, like, it's Juno who kind of makes the advance and keeps going to his house, but his character shouldn't have let Juno hang out with him. It's just a bit nonsense. Also, he gets a divorce right before he's about to have his baby, which just makes his character even more insufferable. Everything else about this film is great though. I really like the soundtrack, which feels very Wes Anderson-y, and you get to see J.K. Simmons being a pretty wholesome father, which is not usually the case. Clueless is about a rich girl who falls in love with her brother, but it's fine because he's played by Paul Rudd, and also they're not blood related. So as I'm going through these films and watching them, I'm realising that I'm watching a lot of teen dramas and comedies, and I do think I need to switch up soon, I think. But a lot of the most popular movies on Letterboxd are teen films, so if that says anything, I don't know. There's another film that feels just so of its time period, which I like. The first 5 seconds of the opening credits start playing and it's the most 1995 thing I've seen. But also on another note, this film is just so fun and vibrant, and I'm not just talking about the colour grading. There's just a lot of bounciness to a lot of the characters in here, and a lot of over-the-top gags that just make fun of the rich. The highway scene being probably the highlight of the film for me. Alicia Silverstone just pulls off that bratty kind of stuck-up character really well, but also makes the character really likeable, which I feel is really hard to do. Adaptation is about a screenwriter who struggles to adapt a book. This might be my favourite film so far. I really like films that get a bit meta, but this film takes that meta-ness to genius levels, and it's all because of Charlie Kaufman, really. If you don't know, this whole film ends up being about him writing the screenplay for this film that you're watching, even though it probably definitely is a little exaggerated in a lot of moments. It connects to being John Malkovich as well, as he worked on that film, obviously, and some of the actors from that film actually came back to play themselves in this film, which is really crazy and mind-bending. I also just love how Charlie Kaufman represents himself in here as this really shy existential guy who struggles so much to push himself, and he constantly goes round and round in circles with a screenplay, which is kind of relatable with a lot of situations in my life and a lot of other people's as well, obviously. The character of Charlie also has a fictional brother in here as well who wants to write this very commercialized, very mainstream screenplay, which Kaufman is really against. And sometimes it's like Kaufman writes this brother as like an opposite version of himself and like a brother he wished he had. I don't know, maybe I'm getting too deep into this film with the analysis. Nicolas Cage is great in here. I haven't even started talking about like the author of the book that Kaufman wants to adapt and how interesting that's done. Yeah, it's going to the top of the list. And that film has instantly been topped because I watched The Departed. The Departed is about two guys undercover, but there's a twist. Last year I binged a lot of Scorsese's stuff, but I just never got round to watching this one. This is a near perfect film from him, which isn't very surprising. I'm not gonna lie, there are some films where I check out the Wikipedia summary to see if I missed anything, and there were a few times where I was reading through it and going, oh, because there were a lot of subtle moments in here that play into the larger plot. This film kind of reminds me of Catch Me If You Can a little bit, in the sense that it has Leo in it, but it's also this cat and mouse chase, and this time you get to see both sides very equally, which I like. I just really love the contrast of these two people undercover, one of them who is saved by the police and another who uses the police as a way to hide. I did not in a million years expect that ending as well. It's not particularly satisfying, but it's really fitting for the tone of the film, so... The Imitation Game is about an autistic gay person who saved millions of lives. I didn't mean to say it like that. I knew about Alan Turing going in and what he did. I learned about him through computer science in secondary school, but I didn't remember much about his actual personality and his personal life. I think Benedict Cumberbatch was the perfect casting for this character. Alan Turing definitely had this kind of Sherlock quality to him, I guess. But he overall has a much more odder personality, which a lot of people just didn't get at the time. The way he managed to decrypt these German codes is just so interesting to me, and the ending of this film is just so tragic and just shows how stupid people were back in the day regarding homosexuality. Just let people be gay. Like, come on.
Come on, big boy! Show me you willing!
Forrest Gump is about a mentally challenged person who goes against the odds. This is by far the most popular film on Letterboxd that I watched last month, and I do think it deserves that. It's gone to the top of the list for me. I recently found out that a lot of people hate this film and call it like American propaganda due to Forrest doing stuff that the American government encourages, I guess, like enlisting in the army and starting his own business, and he achieved all these things by like following the rules. But at the end of the day, it's a movie, okay? And I think it's a very well written movie at that as well. Forrest is just such a lovable character, and he's played perfectly by Tom Hanks. It's so engaging watching him tell this story from the park bench and how much stuff he did and the people he met. The film really attempts to tug at the heartstrings at the end, and it really works because of how much was seen in this guy's life. The ending's perfect. I think the pacing slows down a little around the end of the second act, and I think it meanders just a little bit, but that's my only complaint really. I just really love this film. Her is a really joyful but also sad film about this guy who falls in love with a robot. Something that scares me about this film is that we are so close to making a concept like this reality. There's now AI chatbots that act and sound pretty human, and it's just a matter of time before it can actually make an actual connection with a human. There's something bittersweet about this whole film because you can see this guy falling in love and being happy, but it's not with an actual human, and it's just devastating watching him mess up dates and everything just because he knows he won't love anyone more than he loves this operating system. I love the design of this world's future as well. It just looks so modern but also kind of cozy with the way everyone is dressed, and the design of all the technology feels a little bit retro. In a world where AI is a threat and soon has the ability to take over jobs, I think this is one of the more relevant films on this list, I guess. Saving Private Ryan is about a group of soldiers who are tasked to save Private Ryan. This is the third and final Spielberg film that I watched last month, and it's my favourite. I kind of think it's perfect, to be honest. It feels like Spielberg had in mind to make like a complementary film to Schindler's List that showed another horrible, different side to World War II. And whilst that film is pretty slow and takes its time so that we can take in the absolute atrocities taking place, this film just doesn't stop. There's a lot of shaky cam usage, which I feel can ruin a film if used too much, an example being The Hunger Games. But the use of it in here just takes you onto the battlefield with these soldiers and just makes everything so much more visceral and real. Another massive standout is the sets, which never felt like sets. Every time there was a scene in an evacuated town or the beach at the start of the film, it just looks so good. You've got amazing acting from everyone involved as well. The sound design is amazing. I've gushed about a lot of films on this list so far, but this is the one that I'm gushing about the most. So for that reason, it's going to go to the top of the list. Donnie Darko is about a kid who sleepwalks. I don't really want to give too much away after this because I went in completely blind with this as well, really, and I was really surprised about how well this film was done. This is the second film on this list where Jake Gyllenhaal plays a weird guy, by the way. Like The Departed, this one was one that I had to look through the Wikipedia summary on, but once I fully got a grasp on everything and what they were doing, I said out loud, oh wow, because of how good this concept was. I really like how for a good chunk of this film everything feels off. There's a romance that blooms in this film and some comedic moments, but they just don't feel right, which is probably intentional by the filmmakers, because there's this great reveal at the end which almost like recontextualizes everything you saw before, and it's almost like kind of genius. The soundtrack choices in here are great as well, and I love how it just lets these songs play out and we get to see everyday life for these characters. It's just one of those films that will stick with me for a while, and I kind of want to rewatch it as soon as possible, as there's stuff that I probably missed in here. Do the Right Thing is about a black neighbourhood on the hottest day of the year. This movie has now gone to the top of the list. I just keep topping myself here with these film picks. This movie is just amazing, and it's another one that's still pretty relevant today. I don't want to spoil the film, but there's a turning point in the film where something happens and it becomes really dark and really real. I love how this film is set on the hottest day ever, as you kind of have all the characters in here at their boiling point, quite literally, and it takes one little thing for like everything just to tip over. It's just another one of those films that has stuck with me long after watching it. Like the acting, the Dutch angles, Public Enemy, there's so much to analyse and pick apart. I didn't expect to recognise so many actors in here as well. Samuel L. Jackson, Martin Lawrence, John Turturro playing a racist Italian. So many powerhouse performances in here. It's just so good. It's just so good. So we're about halfway through. We're actually over halfway through, I think. It's roasting hot today, just like the film Do the Right Thing. Overall, this challenge is a little bit awkward. Some days it does kind of feel like homework, where I have to force myself to watch a film because sometimes I just don't feel like watching a film. But forcing myself to watch all these films is making me realise how much I do really love films, because I would have quit this challenge a few films in, probably, if I wasn't a big fan of films. Yeah, we're still going strong. It does feel satisfying ticking these films off my list. These are films that I've been wanting to watch for so long. If you enjoy this video so far, consider giving it a like. If you enjoy my content, my personality, I don't know. Maybe subscribe. But yeah, let's just get back on with everything. Girl Interrupted is about a girl who gets sent to a psych ward for trying to kill herself. This one was a little disappointing in my opinion. There's two phenomenal performances in here from Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie, and I like how their friendship goes back and forth in here. And there's also a beginning of the third act breakup, which is a cliche that I hate, but in this film there's actually a valid reason for why they break up, and it's a really effective moment. But aside from that, not a lot happens in here really. I feel like there are some moments that tries to be a little like a darker version of The Breakfast Club actually, but they don't focus on the other people in the psych ward enough to make some scenes impactful enough. The main character gets 2 chances to escape the psych ward, but she keeps going back, which just means everything just gets a bit repetitive after a while. I like the arc this main character goes on, but I wanted to see her adjusting back to normal life or something, and it just ends. It's a well done film, but I feel like it could do with some like seasoning or something, I don't know. No Country for Old Men is about a guy who stumbles upon a very large sum of money that a lot of people want. This is another very unsatisfying movie, like The Departed, and it has a very open-ended ending, which I'm not sure how to feel about. But I did really love this film, up until that big moment, which, if you watch the film, you know what I'm talking about. Javier Bardem is just terrifying in here as a hitman, and he just feels inescapable. There's a scene with Josh Brolin's character, and you're seeing everything from his perspective as he's being hunted by him at this motel, and you've already seen his face already and what he's like, but this scene decides to keep his face hidden until Josh Brolin's character sees him, which just makes everything so much more suspenseful. That scene is probably one of the best I've seen in the whole list of movies that I watched last month. Again, the ending, I don't know how to feel about, and I think I need to sit with it a little bit more. I'll give it a rewatch because it didn't totally sit right with me, but it's great.
Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice is about a daughter who is pressured into marrying into a wealthy family or risk being poor. Ooh. This is not the film's fault at all, but this is just really not my thing. I'm not big on romance, and I'm not big on Georgian era period pieces, so I could just never fully get into this. There's good performances in here, and there's some really nice cinematography moments where a shot would zoom in or it would focus on one thing and then it would focus on something behind it. I think that added a little bit of flair to the whole thing, but I just did not care one bit about the romance blooming between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. There were a few moments where I got slightly interested in what was going on for a scene, and then it just lost me again. I understand how other people enjoy this thing, but nah, it's just not for me. Citizen Kane is about a big important guy who passes away, and reporters trying to find out what his last word meant. There's some people who find this to be the greatest film of all time, and then there's other people who just call it boring. I personally lean more to the classic side. This film is just so ahead of its time. So ahead of its time, in fact, that I was fully expecting a blooper reel to start playing in the end credits by the way the credits began. The cinematography of this thing is beautiful. This film is also one of the first films that features a jump scare in the form of a parrot. It's pretty interesting looking through this guy's life with this reporter and the rise and fall of his business. It's just really great. The acting is some of the first acting I've seen in cinema where everything is taken dead serious as well, and a character isn't making a goofy face or something to hammer a point in, which was kind of a carry on from the silent film era, I guess. But yeah, I thought it's a really good film. The Prince of Egypt is about Moses, who freed the slaves and parted the Red Sea. This is a Bible story that I'm not as familiar with. I took religious studies in secondary, but most of the Christianity stuff we did was on Jesus' death and resurrection, so it was interesting seeing the story for the first time and in an animated form. And this is only an hour and a half, but it feels so insanely epic. I had goosebumps during a few sequences in here, mostly the parting of the Red Sea moment, because the score made everything just so grand and epic whilst not being too in your face. This might be slightly blasphemous, but the rivalry between Moses and Ramses really reminded me of Optimus Prime and Megatron in Transformers 1, in a sense that they were such good friends, and then one disagreement between the two just spirals out of control to the point where they're just on two completely opposite sides and just despise each other. Val Kilmer and Ralph Fiennes are great in the lead roles, and I can't really critique the story because it's a Bible story. I don't want to get blasphemous, okay, so...
On the Green Mile.
The Green Mile is about a guy who works on death row with a water infection. I'm not going to beat around the bush, this is my favourite film on this list so far. This is by the same director as The Shawshank Redemption, and that film is perfect and has so many satisfying payoffs. So it's no surprise that this film has a lot of those as well. I never expected this film to have so many supernatural elements as well as religious elements as well, but it kind of makes sense with the concept of death just being around the corner for a lot of these people. Tom Hanks is great as the main character, and the journey he goes on throughout this film is so investing. This is an over 3-hour film, and it just felt like a breeze. The pacing was that good. This is one of those films where it's just so special, and I just don't have much else to say about it other than it's perfect. It's just perfect. Birdman is about an actor who fell off and tries to recapture that fame by creating a stage play. I recently watched The Studio a few months back, and that show clearly took a lot of inspiration from this, with the jazzy soundtrack and everything being in one take. It just really works to heighten the tension in a lot of scenes and then make some more intimate moments that much more intimate, because it kind of feels like you're a fly on the wall in some of these conversations. Talking about flying, this guy played a superhero called Birdman when he was in his prime, and there's a lot of moments where he imagines himself flying and telekinetically moving things around, which is really well done. He also has the personality of this Birdman constantly talking to him and egging him on to do things, and it's really scary in some moments because you sometimes can't discern what's going on inside his head and what's actually real. It's just really well made. Michael Keaton's performance might be one of the best on the list. I do think some of the side plots in here were a little unneeded, especially with the Edward Norton character and Michael Keaton's daughter, which doesn't really go anywhere, but aside from that, it's great. The Godfather is about the Corleone family who struggle to run a mafia. It's alright. No, actually, this film is really great and really earns the classic status. The only Francis Ford Coppola film that I've watched before this is Megalopolis, which is not great, but this film was when he was in his prime, and it really shows. First of all, the look of this thing is great. It has a slight warmness to it with the colours and the lighting of some of the scenes, but it also feels really gritty. The scenes of violence and death in here feel really impactful due to the look of everything. The story of the Corleones is so epic as well and spans all these years. I do wish I could have gotten a grasp of the story a little bit more. This is another one of those films where I did rely a bit on the Wikipedia summary. I don't know if it's just me, but I also can't put most names to faces in this film as well, which I find it hard to do with the next film as well. But aside from that, it's a masterpiece. The Godfather Part 2 is the continuation of the Corleone family who struggle to run a mafia. Yeah, I just wasn't totally into this thing. I really like seeing Vito's backstory in here and his rise to power. You've got some really spicy court drama stuff in here, but there's a lot of plot points with Michael and the Corleones that I just could not be invested in, and those plot points played out over almost 3.5 hours, so it's safe to say that I was a little uninterested during some points. Again, it doesn't help that I can't tell a lot of the characters apart or put a name to a face. I don't know, maybe I'm racist against Italians. This film still retains the beautiful style of the first film, and the acting is great. Robert De Niro is perfectly cast as a younger Vito, but personally I think it's a step down from the previous film, which people clearly do not agree with, judging by the Letterboxd score, but okay. Hello? I think, oh, that's all of them. You know what that means? It's time for a ranking. Pride and Prejudice, 10 Things I Hate About You, Girl Interrupted, Clueless, The Breakfast Club, Juno, The Godfather Part 2, E.T., Good Will Hunting, Corpse Bride, Mean Girls, The Imitation Game, Citizen Kane, Superbad, Being John Malkovich, No Country for Old Men, 500 Days of Summer, Her, The Prince of Egypt, The Godfather, Catch Me If You Can, Birdman, Nightcrawler, Adaptation, The Departed, Forrest Gump, Donnie Darko, Saving Private Ryan, Do the Right Thing, and finally The Green Mile. And that's it. I would recommend this challenge for people who just have a list of films that they really want to watch and just haven't got round to watching them yet. I think just dedicating a whole month to just banging them out, I think is a good thing. I actually watched more than 30 films in June because I also watched some 2025 films that I really wanted to see. If you want to check those films out that I watched, then check out my
Letterboxd.
I was also dying to watch a bunch of TV. Squid Game, The Bear, Ironheart. You also got Dandadan that comes out literally in a few days when I'm recording this. New season of South Park comes out in a few days. So I'm just going to have to dedicate most of July to just watching TV shows. I enjoy this challenge. I feel like I got a lot out of it. I feel like my film knowledge is expanded. I feel like I recognise more tropes and that as well. I recognise like reoccurring tropes. There's a lot of films in this list where starts with like an old person and then they start telling a story or something and then it flashes back and then the whole film is like the flashback until at the end when it flashes forward again. There's been a lot of films like that. Forrest Gump, Catch Me If You Can, Saving Private Ryan, The Green Mile. I'm just realising as I'm listening to all these films, these are all Tom Hanks films. I don't know if I'll do the same thing next year because it is a lot, and also I kind of want to be employed, and this is very much an employed activity. I definitely want to get a job after doing this challenge.